Hello my friends, and a very warm welcome back to my painting channel. And in this video I'm going to be painting 4 really cool different skin tones. So with this we're going to use the same model, and I'm going to use a few Barbarians, so a few Celtic warriors from Warlord games. I'm going to paint 3 in the exact same model, so I tried to put them together so that they look very similar. And then I'm also going to have an added random one for a little bit of a darker skin tone as well. So I'm going to use 4 different brands, and we're going to start with Vallejo. So this is a light skin tone, and this is my tried and tested way of painting skin. So I'm going to use beige red as the base coat, and if you want to follow along, this is a very simple way of painting skin. So we're just going to base the whole of the skin area with this beige red, and what we're going to do is we're going to try to make these skin tones really easy to do. So we're going to paint them using pretty much just 2 different colors and maybe a slight highlight, but nothing more than that. We're going to try and keep things very simple. Now for the 3 lighter skin tones, I'm going to use the same wash with these, and for the although I'm using different brands, for all of the washes I'm going to be using the Army Painter washes for these. So I'm going to be using the tones. So we're going to use the flesh wash once that beige red base coat is done, and we're going to cover the whole model using this flesh wash. Now I'm going to use the same flesh wash on all 3 of the lighter skin tones. If you don't use flesh wash and you don't use the Army Painter, by all means you can use alternative flesh colours and things like that. The Reichland Flesh shade from Citadel is equally as good, or the skin tone that you can get from Vallejo as well will also do quite well. Now once all of that is dry, so we've got our base coat and our shade, we're then just going to go in and we're going to start to build these colours back up. So we're going to go back with the base colour that we used, and we're going to use that beige red. And using the very tip of the brush, we're going to use a little bit of a sort of sketching motion just across the pecs and the area of the muscle. And the reason why we're using these brush strokes to create this little bit of a texture across the muscle is so that it breaks up that muscle and it breaks up the skin, so that it gives you some of the slightly darker tones underneath showing through, and this creates a more natural sort of skin tone. You don't want to paint everything just one flat colour and then one flat colour again. You can use a mixture of stippling and scratching techniques and things like that. And what this will do is it will allow the paint to create those sort of contrasts between the highlights and the colours below. And this will become a lot more pleasing on the eye and a lot more subtle when you look at the model. It will make the skin tones look a lot more natural and a lot more neutral. So don't be too worried about your brush strokes, because they are going to add into the perfect way of sort of measuring and looking at the model anyway. So as you can see, I'm just using the very tip of the brush, and I'm following along on all of the raised areas, leaving the shade in the recessed points, as so you can see this just across all of the muscle area. I'm going to do the same thing across the face. Now if you followed my channel and you've watched me painting quite a few different models previously, you'll know that this is a skin tone and a way of painting skin that I do use quite often. As I said, this is my most common go-to sort of way of painting skin. I find it very simple, I find it very effective, and I also think that the end result looks really great. Now once that's dry, we're going to use the beige red, and we're also going to mix in half of the basic skin tone. With this we're going to use 1 blob of each, so half and half, or 50-50, just so that it makes it nice and easy. We're not going to worry too much about percentages and going up in steps and stages. We're just going to go half and half, because that's going to make things nice and simple and easy in terms of stepping up through the shades and through the model. And again, as you can see, I'm just going to use the scratching motion just across the larger areas, across the pec area here, across the front end of the muscle. And again, those brush strokes and the scratches are going to add to that depth and that muscle tone and definition as well. Using the very tip of the brush like this, and using these sort of scratches and these kind of small little shorter little bursts with the brush, is going to create that texture and give the model that really cool fine sort of texture effect on the skin. Also, when it comes to doing the muscle just around the stomach area, you want to kind of use the highlight more towards the top area now, so that this will blend the skin tones together and blend that highlight into the undertone just below. And as you can see, like I said before, we're just following around the model, painting the highlighted and raised areas nice and quickly and easily, while leaving the shade in the recess, leaving that shade pool down in the recess points. So painting just around the face and the nose, not forgetting all of the hands, the knuckles, the fingers, and of course the muscle tone and definition just across the arms as well. And again, using those brush strokes to create texture across the arms and to create texture in just like so, just where you can see a little bit more definition to the muscle, because your muscles and things aren't just a flat colour, there is a bit of definition there as well. So once we've used the in-between highlight of the beige red and the basic skin tone, we're then going to use the basic skin tone on its own, and we're just going to build that up in some of the more highlighted areas. So this is now the major highlight that we're going to use, so we're just going to pick this out across the face, on the cheeks, the nose and things like that. And again, we're going to do the same thing across the muscle that we've been doing, just to build up that tone and texture in the exact same way. So I'm kind of showing you this in a very relatively easy way of doing this, because this should be a nice natural, a nice quick simple way of building these colors and textures and building this highlight through to the skin tones. We're going to use the same techniques on all of the 4 different models that we're going to paint, and then at the end then it'll give you an idea as to different tones, textures and colors that we can get out of skin just by doing such a simple and quick and easy technique as well. So as you can see, I'm just building across those stomach muscles again, just trying to pick out more of the top half of those muscle area, so that then that blends through and picks out the highlights quite nicely as well. Like I said, this Vallejo setup is pretty much my most common way of painting skin. So if this is one that you've seen me do quite regular, you should be quite familiar with this one by now. But we will move on and use some of the other paints and some of the other colours as well, just to break things up and give you guys a bit of a mixture of different things. Now when it comes to blending these paints together and putting these highlighted layers on top, I do recommend that you thin your paints, and whether that be with a small amount of flow improver or a little bit of water, that is equally up to you. It is completely up to you which way you thin your paint, but thinning the paints down is going to give you a more smooth transition. Now I would normally use either 1 or 2 blobs or 2 spots of water just to thin the paints down, just to make sure that they blend together into the miniature and make it look a lot more subtle. Now once this one is done, it should be as easy as that. So we've got a base layer, a wash, back to our base, half and half highlight, and a highlight. As simple as that. And that's our first one done. So that's the Vallejo. I haven't spent much time doing all of the details. I've just put a base colour on each just to kind of break up the grey so that we can see how the skin looks. And that is my Vallejo one. So that is my tried and tested, most common way of painting, and I love using it. Now from there we're going to use an army painter set, and we're going to paint more of a barbarian sort of skin tone for part 2. So we're going to use the tanned flesh first of all. And this is a much darker red, a much deeper red colour than what we were using with the Vallejo. So this gives us the opportunity now to paint something that has a little bit more of a darker, deeper sort of reddy skin tone. And it's up to you sort of how far you build this one back up as well. So the cool thing with this is we're going to build this one up using the base colour just like we've done. So we're going to use the exact same techniques again. But again, it's up to you how far you want the highlight to go later on. So just using the base colour first and covering the whole miniature. And as you can see, my paint is nice and thin, so more than 1 coat of thin paint is always better than 1 big thick coat of paint, because by putting too much thick paint on, you will lose detail in the model. So it's always nice to use nice thin paints, as you can see, because then it covers and gives a much smoother, nicer coverage onto your model. As I said previously, we're going to stick with the flesh wash once again, so we're going to use the same colour, and we're just going to cover the whole miniature in the exact same wash, just so that this makes it nice and simple and ties these paintings together. So it should tie all of these models together and make it nice and easy and nice and sort of easy for people to follow along, and nice and simple to sort of just learn how to do this basic sort of skill. So as you can see, I'm just covering all of the miniature, just trying to manipulate where I pool the wash, because I want it to be darker in those little folds of the skin and things like that. Once that's dry, then we're going to go back to the tanned flesh, and we're going to use this again and again, like I say, using a nice thin down paint and using the very tip of the brush. As you can see, we're now going to start picking out those textures and tones in the muscle by using the brush strokes to create that element of depth and sinewy muscle tones and all of these different things. And it's a nice simple way of painting, but as I said earlier, it's something that really does stand out, especially when you're painting armies that are like barbarians or that do have a lot of skin showing. This will give you a nice area of the model that really does stand out and pops on the table as well. This is great for all those different kinds of barbarians, you know, when you've got dwarves or Amazons, you know, and all these different things. Now, once that's done, we're going to mix tan flesh and barbarian flesh, and we're going to do exactly the same thing, which is half and half, so just 50% of each, or one blob of each. And as you can see, I'm just preparing where those lines are going to be, just down the pec area here, and just using the very tip of the brush, we're just going to scratch those lines in and create that texture and that depth to the muscles again. See, it's a very simple, but a very cool technique. It's very easy to follow, very simple to do, but it looks great on the miniature as well. And the cool thing with these paints, with them being thinned down, they're going to dry together in a really subtle, pleasing way. So they're going to blend together really nicely as well. So as I said, I normally like to use either 1 or 2 little drops of paint just to thin the paint down. Someone did say to me once, a good friend of mine, said that you want the paint consistency to look a little bit like the same kind of consistency you'd get out of milk. So you don't want it too watery and you don't want it too thick. You want it to just have that little bit of a consistency similar to what you'd expect out of milk. Once that's done, then we're going to use the highlights. So we're going to use the barbarian flesh. And we're going to do the exact same thing, so we're just going to build this up in a nice highlight and just starting across the front area here, just across the pecs. We're just going to start to build those lines and those creases and that element and depth of muscle tone and texture. You can see now just by building each layer, and as you build each layer, how much this builds to the effect and builds to the overall texture and style of the models. So the painting that we're doing in this way, you can see just how quickly and easily we build in those highlights up, and how awesome these models are going to look when they're all painted with this cool blended skin tone texture. I really enjoy painting skin. Skin is one of those things that I find is, if you don't know how to paint skin, it can be quite daunting and it can be quite a concern. But when you know how to paint skin and you've got a few cool little techniques like this, it's a very rewarding way of painting. Because normally with your models, you've got all your armor and your great sort of colors and things like that, and then your faces and your skin looks great when they're done when they're done properly. So from there, we're going to mix with our highlighted barbarian flesh, and we're going to add a small amount of skeleton bone to it as well. So this is a nice creamy color skeleton bone, and that is going to give you a perfect highlight. Again, I'm only using half and half, so I'm going to keep everything nice and straightforward and simple, nice and easy. And what this is doing, this is going to boost the vibrancy of that barbarian flesh, but without turning it white. We don't want to highlight our skin with white, just the same as we don't want to highlight things like browns and things with white. It's always good to highlight these with cream colour. And skeleton bone with the army painter set is a brilliant colour for highlighting things like flesh, and also highlighting things like wood when you've got things like shields and things like that, and browns. It's really good colour for those things. The reason why I said you could push this one as far as you want is because at that stage, that's where I'm leaving this one. So I'm leaving the army painter one at this stage, but should you want to, you could always add that little bit more of skeleton bone and boost that vibrancy and boost those highlights further should you want. But again, they're your models, you can paint them how you like, so I leave that completely up to you. And as you can see, this colour is a little bit darker than the first one, so our Vallejo colour was really nice and bright, and this one now, we've got a bit more of a reddy sort of skin tone to this one, so he's a little bit of a darker sort of skin colour as well, which is fantastic. Now, moving on to part 3, we're going to use a Citadel skin tone. So we're going to use the Citadel paints, and we're going to start by using the Cadium flesh tone. Now, you could go with Bugman's Glow to begin with, should you want. Personally, I find Bugman's Glow to be too dark to begin with, unless you really want to paint darker flesh tones. So instead of painting dark flesh tones, I'm going to start with the Cadian flesh tone, and I'm going to start so that this one becomes a little bit lighter, and then it'll tie into the same sort of thing as we've done with the Army Painter and the Vallejo paints. So we're just going to cover all of the model using this Cadian flesh tone, all of the skin areas using this one. We're just going to use a nice thin coat again, so not going crazy on how thick this is going to be. We're just going to cover the whole thing in 1 or 2 coats that are nice and thin down, so that we get an even coverage, just like so. And I'm not being overly careful, you know, doesn't matter too much if you make mistakes, because you can fix it all later. Sticking with it, like I said, I'm going to use the same wash, so we're using the flash wash. If you want and you are exclusively just a Citadel user, then Raglan Flash Aid is the perfect alternative, because that will do the same thing for you anyway. So the reason why I'm using flash wash on these is because flash wash is a cool colour where it has this sort of orangey, sort of warm glow to it, has this warm tinge. So when you paint in skin, it does add that little bit of warmth to the skin as well, which is exactly what you want. You don't want to put like too much sort of black or anything like that on your washes, so that it takes away some of that colour and that glow. The flash wash is perfect because it gives you just that little warm glow. Once that's dry, then we're going to go back to the Cadian flesh tone, so we're going back to our base colour, and we're going to start to build that back up using the exact same techniques that we have used previously. So we're going to start just here on the pack, and as you can see, we're just going to slowly build those lines up, and slowly build up the way that the sort of muscle texture and tone is controlled by using the very tip of the brush. So we're using the tip of the brush just to build those textures while leaving some of the colours and some of the tones below, just so that that builds up a little bit more depth, a little bit more texture to the muscles. And we're just going to slowly build this up in stages. Again, like I say, with the muscles just around the stomach, it's always worth, as you gradually progress through the highlights, just using a little bit across the very top edges, because then as you sort of as it dries together, it becomes a much more subtle, much more pleasing to look at kind of blend and texture as well, which is fantastic. As you can see, I'm just trying to be as careful as possible, just trying to pick out the very small fine detail parts just underneath the arms here. And I'm going to do the same thing across the arms and the shoulders and the back and everything like that on all of the models. Just showing you quickly on the front with each one, just sort of the way that I'm doing it. And as I say, this is a very quick video. You can spend a lot more time than I am and really sort of pick out all of those details and get really creative with it. So from there, I'm going to use half and half, so again, just one blob each. That is using the Cadian flesh tone that we're using as a base, and Kislev flesh, which is a perfect highlight, meaning that using half and half is going to be the first really good half stop up in the highlight, because we don't want to go straight to the Kislev flesh because we'll end up highlighting way too quickly. So we kind of want to blend this together quite nicely and get a really smooth sort of transition between the highlighted tones and the darker tones. And again, we're just going to build all of those textures and tones up using the very tip of the brush. And as you can see, I'm leaving some of the textures and some of the colours below and some of the darker points below, just so that that creates this really nice, even, nice to look at, pleasing sort of blend on the skin tones. As you can see then, just across the stomach muscles, I'm just picking out some of the top parts of these, again, just so that that blends through in a nice even way, in a nice even fashion. And there you go, you can see that we're already starting to get some really nice blends and colours through on the Citadel. The reason why I decided to do this with a lot of different paint brands is because personally I don't think there's one paint brand that is better than another. I find all different paint brands offer different things, and they're all very unique and very cool in their own different ways. I also find that you are better, personally, I find it better to have a mixed range of different paints rather than always just using the same paint brand or the same paints. It's always nice to have a good mixture, because that varies and changes your painting style and gives you a lot of choice and options when you're painting. Now for the final layer on this particular model, we're using Kislev flesh on this one. So this is just Kislev flesh on its own, and again using that thin down paint and the very tip of the brush, we're just building that layer and texture up. Now, there is a big shout out here as well, because if you want to, you can always highlight this a little bit further by adding a small amount of flayed one flesh into this as well. I'm not going to do that for this particular tutorial because I wanted to keep this as equal and as even and as quick and as easy as possible. But if you wanted to, flayed one flesh would be the perfect step up to this. So if you are a Citadel user, that would be the next step up if you wanted to get some really extreme contrast on that skin as well. And as you can see, I'm just using the very tip of the brush and using some of those brush strokes now to pick out and use for those sort of tones and textures and things like that, the effects that we want out of the muscles, and it's going to create a lot more character to the model as well. Like I said earlier, I find skin a very rewarding thing to paint. It is a really interesting one to paint because like I say, when you know how to do it and you enjoy doing it, you can really get some cool looking effects out of it. So once that's done, that should be the Citadel one, and as you can see, we've got a similar sort of tone to this one as we did with our original Vallejo. If we pushed this one with the flayed one flesh, we might have got quite similar and to the same sort of effect, but you can really see on those pecs where those scratchy brush strokes are really picking up that texture and detail now, and it looks fantastic. Nice and simple and quick and easy. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to part 4. In part 4, I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to use something a little bit more niche, and I'm going to use scale 75. And with this one, we're going to use Arbuckle's Brown, which is this really nice reddy purple brown colour, and we're going to paint this model using a much darker skin tone. So we're going to give ourselves something completely different and unique to try as well. I always love pushing boundaries when it comes to skin tones. I love painting loads of different skin tones on my models for my armies. I love my armies consisting of mixed different textures and skin toned warriors. I love having dark skin tones and light skin tones all mixed together. I love how just by changing the skin you can get a completely different character and a completely different feel out of your models, and I think it looks amazing on the battlefield when you have so many different things. So once that one is dry, we're going to use a purple tone from the Army Painter, and we're just going to cover the whole model in this. Like I said, that Arbuckle's Brown is a really fantastic colour because it's got this sort of reddy purple kind of colour to it already. So when you add this purple wash on top, this is really going to make this model pop. I mean, you don't really need to do loads more to it to get the model to look cool, but we are going to push it just a little bit further and get it to look really, really nice. The purple tone from the Army Painter is a really cool colour as well, and this matches and adds a great effect mixed in with this Arbuckle's Brown. It really does build the texture and the tone. It's so, so nice. So once that's done, we're going to go back to using the Arbuckle's Brown, and we're going to build this up using the exact same tones and textures and techniques that we've done previously. So we're going to use just the base colour on its own, and we're going to build, using the very tip of the brush, all of those scratchy sort of muscle textures and tones just across the pec area and just across the front area here. Now, if this is something that you'd like to see and you've enjoyed the different sort of skin tones that I've been painting, if you'd like to see me paint a lot more sort of darker tones and give you an option of different kind of browns and different kind of flesh tones in that sense, let me know in the comments below, and I'll make sure to make another video dedicated just to lots of different sort of more unique sort of skin tones and less common skin tones then. But as you can see with this Arbuckle's Brown now, as we build in this back up on top, there is a little bit of a purpley sort of undertone coming through, and this is a really cool sort of colour. This is a really great effect because this is really going to build that base tone that we can then sort of mix other colours with. So from there we're going to use the Arbuckle's Brown and a Bosch Chestnut, and I'm going to use, again, half and half, so 50-50, one blob of each, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to slowly build this back up on the muscles and all of these textures. The cool thing with painting something when you've got such a dark skin tone is when you add those slight highlights and those little subtle colours that just catch the light, it really does stand out a lot more on your model, and it really does make the models look fantastic. It makes them look individual, and it really is a great way of painting your skin as well. So as you can see, I'm just trying to be careful, especially around the face area, picking up the nose, the cheekbones and the chin. It is difficult for my camera to pick this up, despite the fact that I'm using a light, because the dark skin tone is so dark that I've chosen that it is a little bit difficult to paint on camera. But you kind of get the idea. And I'm using the same techniques that I've used in the other three, so if you're a little bit concerned, it doesn't matter too much. You can always check what I've done with the others and sort of use the same effects and the same style through this as well. I'm going to do the same thing, just build in those tones and textures up, just across down the back muscles. There you go, you can see we leave in the darker areas and the shade just sitting in the recess points where it's pooled, and there we go, we just build in those colours up really, really nicely. Just like so. So once that's done, then I'm going to use the Bosch Chestnut on its own, and this is really cool now, because by using this with a thinned down layer, you'll really notice that this will go onto the model looking a little bit lighter than it actually is. So once this starts to dry down, this is going to have a really nice subtle blend between that deeper, darker colour that we've got underneath and then the lighter tone that we paint in. So this is really going to pick out almost like the subtle highlights to the brown skin, and it's really going to make an amazing effect and a great looking final model as well. Out of the 4 models that I chose to paint in with this one, this is the first time that I've used these colours and this colour choice and the technique to do this, and this one is actually my favourite of the 4, because I really find that the skin tones really do make this model completely its own. It makes it look so unique and stand out so well. Those sort of subtle purple undertones with this light sort of chestnut colour that just picks out the light, I personally think looks fantastic, and it makes it look so different as well when you put it together with the other models. And again, as you can see, I'm just picking out all of those raised points, using the brush strokes to create the definition of the muscle and things like that, leaving the darker pool in the darker parts just sit in where the shade is just sat in those recess points. And we just build in this colour up, and you can see how subtle this is becoming, and you can see just how much of an effect this very thin layer of chestnut is having on the model. And there you go, all in all, this is the darker colour, all painted and all done. It looks really cool. I personally like this one. I think this is probably my favourite one of the 4, as I say. You get this really subtle sort of light brown colour, but you also get this really dark sort of purpley tone as well. I've had to boost my camera to be able to pick out and see the details on this one, because it is a very dark model, but I think that's what lends in and to making it look so cool. And all in all, there's the 4 together. So we've got our Vallejo, our Army Painter, our Citadel and our Scale 75 all painted together. They're all completely different, they're all completely unique, but they've all been done using the same simple, easy techniques. You have to let me know in the comments below if this is something that you found helpful, if you'd like to see me paint more dark skin tones and different ones, and also let me know which one is your favourite. So what I've decided to do, because I don't want to have advertising and ask you guys for adverts or anything like that, what I've decided to do differently these days is I've decided to add an Amazon wishlist onto my channel. If at any point you feel like you want to gift me something, you are more than welcome to do so, but there is absolutely no obligation for you to do so. You don't have to do it. I literally just put it there as a thank you. As always, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Thank you for your patience, thank you for your time, thank you for your comments, thank you for your positivity. You guys are awesome, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, my friends.